welcome back. We move on now. We'll be looking at Nigeria beyond the oil. Well, I'm sure you have heard some people say that Nigeria's oil will dry up in the next 15, 20 years. So Nigeria should start looking at other ways of surviving because most of Nigeria's money, about 80% of our money, comes from our oil exportation. If you look at the Emirates, for instance, with all the oil that they possess, they are already preparing for the Emirates beyond oil. What is Nigeria doing in readiness for that time when our oil will dry up, as people have said to us? Well, to look at this with us now, we'd like to welcome Dr. Obi Ezekwesili, who is Senior Economic Advisor for Africa Economic Policy Development Initiative of Open Society Foundation. And she will be speaking to us from Abuja. Good morning, Dr. Ezekwesili.
Good morning.
Yes. Second morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. Now, let's begin at the beginning regarding that speculation about Nigeria's oil drying up in the next 15, 20 years. Experts have said that is not likely to happen. So, how much time do we really have to prepare for this eventuality?
I think Nigeria doesn't quite have much time. Nigeria should have prepared for this eventuality as far back as when oil was discovered, because that's what countries that have benefited from their natural resources did.
That is very discouraging news. So that being the way it is, what should Nigeria be doing now, even though we've lost some ground? What should we be doing now in preparation for that?
I think what's very important is for us to look at the entire framework of our economic development strategy. The reality, as we know it, is that countries with natural resources have tended to behave like the child whose dad bequeathed plenty of billions of dollars in heritage too. And so they got the inheritance and decided that this is so good, I don't have to work. However, money quickly evaporates. And so in the case of a nation like Nigeria that's been endowed with oil since it was discovered in Oloibiri in 1956, it ought to have been able to translate the opportunities from oil rent to investment in human capital, and then investment in infrastructure and in building up the kinds of institutions that enable economies to grow.
Let's look at the manufacturing sector. We seem to have a huge problem with that sector right now. And if you were watching the first segment of this program, the deputy governor of the central bank did insist that if we have a decent power infrastructure, it would affect every other part of our life, including industry and so on. What is your take on that?
Well, sometimes we're too quick to jump in at the most visible problem that's to tackle. And the power sector issue is certainly one of the major problems of this country. It's a major bottleneck. But fundamentally, we have the issue of even the vision that we should have for our country. What exactly, who are we? Are we a nation that's completely tied to the apron string of oil and, unable to see that beyond oil, the most important asset that we've been endowed with really are the population of people that we've got. We are the best asset of our nation. To that extent, therefore, having a vision that basically consigns this dominance of oil in our national polity and economy is going to be key. The fundamental problem of Nigeria, whether in the power sector, in the agriculture sector, in the transportation sector, is a problem of governance. It's the problem of the oil-fueled wrong incentive regime that we have in the country. The fact that production and productivity have taken a back seat because there's not been an incentive for really working hard to get in those important structures of the economy to align to what other economies have done. And so we do need to take the conversation slightly beyond, let's just fix the infrastructure and everything would work. Well, a lot of the problems in not fixing the infrastructure is because you haven't dealt with your governance problems.
Okay, let me ask you this. Let's move into the area of the reality of our situation today in Nigeria. You've been involved in transparent NATI, Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, and you have been one of those people that's advised government around the world on the issue of transparency. Now we have a situation where at the tail end of 2012, some amount of money reaching up to over 161 billion was asked for, and it was signed off by the National Assembly. When you have this kind of situation in terms of our budgeting, what's your thought about this kind of money being asked for and we still don't know how it was spent over a period of 3 weeks as part of the fuel subsidy?
I think there are more fundamental issues of which what you referred to, the supplementary budget for subsidy payment about the end of the year just happens to be one. The key issue is that you've got a petroleum sector that even at the time I was in government had a deep challenge. Over many years we were militarized. And so the military culture and tradition didn't lend itself to any form of openness. And so the corporation that happens to be almost the goose that lays the golden egg for Nigeria, the NNPC, began to wear a toga of an independent institution in of itself. And for as long as it had the linkage with the topmost office in the land, it could carry on its activities to the neglect of the rest of the country in providing necessary information. But then comes the advent of democracy, and institutions must lend themselves to transparency, openness, and probity. And so if we are going to make any progress at all in terms of some of the issues you raised, it's going to be on the basis of a complete overhaul of the sector. Sector governance is the heart of making a sector work in a transparent and in an accountable way. On the substantive issue of the subsidy that you referred to, this is a vexing issue in the country. As a citizen of the country, you cannot but be vexed by the fact that this is really been ridden with a lot of bad behavior. And one thing we know about bad behavior is that where bad behavior is not punished, you basically have provided a signal to all other people to engage in similar reckless behavior because it is rewarded.
When you say it's bad behavior on the side of government that has gone back to National Assembly, and the National Assembly has not seen anything wrong, that this amount of money was what was agreed will be spent on fuel subsidy, that has increased over a period of just 3 months. We've got over 161 million that was asked for, is signed off, and we don't have any kind of accountability. When you look at what you have done as part of the key players in the transparent and in NATI, what would you be saying to people in government now?
Frankly, I am as confused about the issues of the subsidy regime and how it has been administered since after we left government. I do recall that as of 2007, when we were leaving government, the subsidy payment was a little less than 300 billion naira. And, oil crude was about $90 at that time. And there's been some creeping up of the price of crude, sometimes a collapse of it between 2008, 2009, and then, a ratcheting up of the pricing. On the basis of an average, I would say that if you worked with even $95 or $100, I still have a bit of difficulty understanding how the subsidy, the size of the scale of the subsidy that government has to pay out of its budget resources amounted to trillions that we suddenly begin to hear. And so saying that the government itself, because this didn't happen during the time that we were in government. And so sometimes when I've had people say, oh, well, this government discovered it and it's trying to fix it, I'm saying, well, it discovered the problem that was created within the time that it was responsible for that problem. And so it's got to fix it, and not only fix it, it has to also identify how those problems happened. What I've seen so far, though, is that there's been an emphasis on the role of the private sector in all of this. And what worries me is that until you can tackle the problems of corruption and poor governance from the two sides of the supplier as well as the person who is demanding, there are always two forces at play. There is the private sector, and then there is the government. And it doesn't seem to me that we're taking a comprehensive approach to this at the moment. So when I look at the scale of the budget for the subsidies, I really want to be educated much more than what I currently know as to what led to it. Even in terms of exchange rate variations between the seasons that we paid for subsidies, or even in terms of the scale of demand, I want to understand how the scale of demand, the daily consumption of fuel in this country grew to the size where we're talking of trillions. And then, if you talked about the later subsidy provision that was made at the end of last year, it must be because some calculation was not properly done in terms of the level of requirements that was needed. And so if indeed it was necessary, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But your key point is we need transparency in terms of what exactly is this subsidy is constituted of. And the role of the civil society in working with both sides of government, whether it be the legislative arm or the executive arm, is key. Because what government is battling with now is credibility crisis. There is a serious erosion of social capital in this country. People don't trust. Even when I was in government, people did not trust government, and you couldn't blame them. For many years, we were in military rule. It was an opaque system of governance. Institutions didn't lend themselves to the needs of society for information. And so there was that basic problem. But now we are in a democracy. The citizens have a strong appetite to know, and their right to know must be responded to, and responded to in a way that builds that trust.